He was only 17, my little brother, dragged into that courtroom like he was less than human. I'll never forget the sound of those chains clanking, the way the judge smirked and told him to crawl, crawl, while our mom sobbed, her hands shaking, begging for mercy. Everyone stared, but no one spoke. I stood there, frozen, my heart screaming. Why didn't I protect him? How could I let this happen? I'm not sure where to start, but I need to get this out. My name's Kayla, and this is about my brother, Marcus, the kid who used to steal my fries and laugh until he couldn't breathe. We grew up in a small town outside Chicago, just the two of us and Mom, in a house that always smelled like her lavender candles. Marcus was the baby, 6 years younger, with this goofy smile that made you forgive him for everything. He wasn't perfect, none of us are, but he was ours, you know, the kind of kid who'd sneak out to shoot hoops at midnight, dreaming of the NBA, even though he was barely 5'9". Mom worked double shifts at the hospital, so I was the one keeping an eye on him. I was supposed to be his big sister, his shield, but I was 23, juggling community college and a part-time job at a diner, trying to figure out my own life. I didn't see the signs. Marcus started hanging with the wrong crowd. Kids from the other side of town who wore their anger like a badge. I thought it was just a phase, that he'd snap out of it. He was still my Marcus, the one who'd cry when he saw a stray dog get kicked. Then came the night that changed everything. Marcus got caught up in a stupid fight at a gas station. Some guy said something, Marcus pushed back, and next thing you know, he's got a misdemeanor assault charge. It wasn't even his fault. Not really. The other guy swung first, but Marcus was the one they pinned it on. Black kid, wrong place, wrong time. You know how it goes. Mom cried when she got the call, and I promised her I'd handle it. I'd talk to the lawyer, show up at court, make sure Marcus came home. The courtroom was cold, sterile, like it was built to strip you of hope. Marcus stood there in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Mom sat next to me, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. I kept whispering to her, "It's gonna be okay, Mom. It's just a misdemeanor." But deep down, I felt this knot in my stomach, like something was about to go wrong. The judge, a man with a face like stone, didn't even look at Marcus when he walked in. He just shuffled papers and sighed, like we were wasting his time. I'd heard stories about this judge. People in town said he had a temper, that he liked to teach lessons. But I didn't think it'd be this. I thought maybe Marcus would get community service, maybe a fine we couldn't afford. I wasn't ready for what came next. I don't think any of us were. The lawyer said the prosecution wanted to make an example out of him, to send a message to kids like him. I hated that phrase. Kids like him? What does that even mean? Kids who dream too big, kids who make mistakes, kids who aren't born with a silver spoon. I keep replaying that day in my head, wondering if I could have done something different. If I'd fought harder, spoken up, maybe he wouldn't have ended up in chains. Maybe Mom wouldn't have had to watch her baby humiliated in front of strangers. I was supposed to protect him, but I was too busy trying to hold myself together. I didn't know how to fight a system that already had its mind made up. All I could do was sit there, my hands clenched, my heart pounding, as the judge's voice cut through the room like a blade. The hearing started like any other. The prosecutor, a woman with a tight bun and a voice like she was reading a script, laid out the charges. Marcus had pushed a guy, maybe thrown a punch, but no one was seriously hurt. It was a scuffle, not a crime spree. But the way she talked, you'd think Marcus was a menace to society. She kept saying he needed to be held accountable, that he was on a dangerous path. I wanted to scream, he's 17, he's a kid. But I stayed quiet because that's what you do in a courtroom, right? You stay quiet and hope the truth speaks for itself. Then the judge spoke and everything changed. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at Marcus like he was sizing him up. "Young man," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "you think you're tough, don't you? Coming in here with that attitude like you're above the law." Marcus didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor, his jaw tight. I could tell he was scared, but he wasn't about to let it show. That's Marcus. always trying to be strong, even when he's breaking inside. The judge didn't like that. He slammed his gavel, and I flinched. "You're going to learn respect today," he said. "You think you can just waltz in here, disrespect this court, disrespect me?" I didn't know what he was talking about. Marcus hadn't said a word, but the judge kept going, his voice getting louder, angrier. "I see kids like you every day. You think you're untouchable. Well, not in my courtroom." Mom grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. I could feel her trembling, and I wanted to tell her it was going to be okay, but the words wouldn't come. The judge turned to the bailiff, a burly guy with a blank face, and said, "Put him in chains, full restraints." My stomach dropped. Chains for a misdemeanor? I looked at our lawyer, a tired public defender who'd barely spoken to us before the hearing. He just shook his head like this was normal. The bailiff hauled Marcus out of the room, and when he came back, my heart stopped. They'd put him in leg irons, handcuffs, and a chain around his waist, like he was some kind of dangerous criminal. He could barely walk, the chains clanking with every step. Mom let out a sob, covering her mouth, and I felt tears burning my eyes. The courtroom was full of other families, lawyers, reporters, and they all stared as Marcus shuffled in, his head down, his shoulders hunched. Then the judge did something I'll never forget. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips, and said, "Go on, boy, crawl to the stand. Show me how tough you are now." The room went silent. I couldn't breathe. "Crawl?" He was serious. Marcus froze, his eyes wide, and for the first time I saw real fear on his face. Mom was crying so hard she could barely sit up, whispering, "Please, no, please." I wanted to stand up, to yell, to do something, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, my mind screaming, "This isn't happening." Marcus didn't move at first. He just stood there, the chains rattling as he trembled. The judge banged his gavel again. I said, "Crawl." He barked, "Or I'll add contempt to your charges." I saw Marcus's shoulders slump, like something inside him broke. Slowly, so slowly, he got down on his knees, the chains scraping against the floor. He started to crawl, his hands and knees dragging, the sound echoing in the silent room. Every clank felt like a punch to my chest. Mom was sobbing, her face buried in her hands, and I could hear people whispering, some shocked, some just watching like it was a show. I kept thinking, why is this happening? Marcus wasn't a murderer. He wasn't a monster. He was a kid who got in a fight, a kid who made a mistake. But the judge didn't see that. He saw a black teenager in an orange jumpsuit, and that was enough for him to decide Marcus deserved to be humiliated. I wanted to run to him, to pull him up, to tell him he didn't have to do this, but I didn't. I just sat there, my hands shaking, my heart breaking, as my little brother crawled across that courtroom floor. The judge watched, his smirk never fading, like he was proud of himself. When Marcus finally reached the stand, he struggled to get up, the chains making it impossible to move freely. The bailiff had to help him, and even then, Marcus kept his eyes on the floor. I could see the shame in the way he held himself, the way his shoulders curled in. This wasn't my brother, the kid who'd laugh at his own bad jump shots. This was someone else, someone the system had decided to break. The hearing went on, but I barely heard it. The prosecutor kept talking about consequences and deterrence, but all I could see was Marcus in those chains, his pride stripped away. The judge sentenced him to 6 months in juvenile detention, plus probation. 6 months for a first-time misdemeanor. It felt like a lifetime, but worse than the sentence was what came before. The way the judge made him crawl, the way he turned my brother into a spectacle. I kept asking myself, why didn't I do something? I was his big sister. I was supposed to protect him, but I just sat there, letting the system chew him up. When we left the courtroom, Mom could barely walk. I had to hold her up, my arm around her waist, as we stumbled out into the hallway. Marcus was gone, taken back to holding, and I didn't even get to say goodbye. The reporters were already outside, their cameras flashing, their questions like knives. Did you know your brother was violent? What do you think of the judge's methods? I wanted to scream at them, "He's not violent, he's a kid," but I just kept my head down, shielding Mom as we pushed through the crowd. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus crawling, heard the chains, saw Mom's tears. I kept thinking about all the times I'd let him down, the times I was too busy with work or school to notice he was slipping away, the times I brushed off his late nights, his new friends, because I thought he'd figure it out. I was supposed to be his big sister, his guide, but I'd failed him, and now he was in a cell, probably scared, probably wondering why we didn't fight harder for him. Mom didn't talk for days. She just sat on the couch, staring at Marcus's old basketball trophy on the shelf. I tried to get her to eat, to talk, but she'd just shake her head, her eyes red and empty. I felt like I was losing her too. I started blaming myself, replaying every moment of that day in court. What if I'd spoken up? What if I demanded the judge stop? Would it have made a difference, or would it have made things worse? I didn't know, and that uncertainty ate at me, gnawing at my self-worth like a parasite. I started digging into the judge's history. His name was all over local news articles about his tough-on-crime stance, his reputation for teaching lessons. There were stories of other kids, mostly Black and Latino, who'd faced his wrath. One article mentioned a boy who'd been sentenced to a year for stealing a bike. Another about a girl who'd been berated in court for a minor curfew violation. It wasn't just Marcus. This judge had a pattern, a vendetta. But knowing that didn't make it easier. It just made me angrier, more helpless. I went to visit Marcus a week later. The detention center was an hour away, a gray building surrounded by fences topped with barbed wire. When they brought him out, he looked different, thinner, quieter, his eyes dull. I tried to hug him through the glass, but all I could do was press my hand against it. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He just shook his head, like he didn't want to hear it. "It's not your fault, Kay," he said, but his voice was flat, like he didn't believe it. He told me about the other kids in there, the fights, the guards who looked at him like he was nothing. He said he kept to himself, stayed out of trouble, but I could hear the fear in his voice. "They don't see me," he said. "They just see the jumpsuit." I wanted to tell him it'd be okay, that we'd get him out, but the words felt hollow. How could I promise anything when I'd already let him down? When I got home, I started writing letters. To the judge, to the public defender's office, to anyone who might listen. I didn't know if it would help, but I had to do something. I wrote about Marcus, about who he really was, not the kid in chains. I wrote about his dreams, his laugh, the way he'd help Mom carry groceries even when he was tired. I wrote about how the judge had humiliated him, how it wasn't justice, it was cruelty. I sent the letters, but I didn't hear back. Not a single response. Then came the second blow. A local news station ran a story about the hearing, framing Marcus as a troubled teen who needed to be taught a lesson. They showed a clip of the judge, all smug and righteous, talking about upholding the law. They didn't show Mom crying or Marcus crawling. They didn't show the truth. I felt like I was screaming into a void, like no one cared. My friends tried to be supportive, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't know what to say. They didn't understand what it was like to watch your family fall apart, to feel like you were failing everyone you loved. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was the problem. Maybe I hadn't been strict enough with Marcus. Maybe I should have quit school, gotten a better job, been there more. Maybe if I'd been a better sister, he wouldn't have been in that courtroom. The guilt was suffocating, like a weight I couldn't shake. I stopped going out, stopped answering texts. I didn't want to talk to anyone, because every conversation felt like a reminder of my failure. One night, I found Mom crying in Marcus's room, holding one of his old hoodies. "I should have been there," she said, her voice breaking. "I should have fought harder." I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, but I couldn't, because I felt the same way. We were both drowning in regret, in the what-ifs that haunted us. I sat next to her, and we cried together. Two women who'd lost the boy we loved to a system that didn't care. Months later, I got a call from a lawyer, not our public defender, but someone new. She'd seen the news story and read my letters. She said we had a case, not just for Marcus, but against the judge. His methods were under investigation, she said, for misconduct, for bias. It wasn't much, but it was a spark of hope. I didn't know if it would change anything, but it meant someone was listening. For the first time, I felt like I could fight back. Marcus came home after 4 months, the sentence reduced for good behavior. He was quieter, harder, like the boy I knew was buried somewhere deep. I'm still trying to reach him to bring him back. Mom smiles more now, but her eyes are still sad. We're healing, but it's slow, like trying to stitch a wound that keeps tearing open. I learned something through all this. Silence is a choice, and it's one I'll never make again. I didn't speak up when Marcus needed me most, and that's a regret I'll carry forever. But I'm speaking now. I'm fighting for him, for us, for every kid who gets chewed up by a system that doesn't see them. I don't know if we'll win, but I know we won't stop. If this story hit you, if you've ever felt helpless watching someone you love get hurt, please share it. Comment below and tell me, how do you keep going when the world feels against you? Subscribe for more stories like this, because we all have a voice, and it's time we use it.